hey there, this is Chris. Welcome to React Basics. In this tutorial, we'll be going over some of the basics of React to get you on a path beyond HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So hopefully if you're viewing this course, you've got some knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you don't, you can still follow along with this tutorial, but there might be some things that might seem a little more tricky and might be difficult to implement beyond this tutorial. Another thing I want to preface is that React can be pretty tricky when you're first learning it. So it's important to try out lots of different things and understand that there are many different and many correct ways to build up applications. So watch this tutorial. If you get something out of it, great. If the whole thing makes sense and it's all super useful, awesome. If it's only bits and pieces, that's totally cool too. So it's important to try and find good resources and find what works for you. As always, if you like the video, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to be going over some of the basics of React by building out this restaurant reviews application. So as you can see, I didn't want to spend too much time focusing on styling with CSS, but by building out this application, we'll be able to go over some of the basics like state and props and the useState hook, as well as going through creating, updating, and deleting pieces of information on our front end. So when you type in a restaurant, we'll say Chewy's, great enchiladas. I can submit that. I can also edit it and margs, and it'll update, and then I can also delete my review. So that's what we'll be making. That's the kind of the overview. Let's go ahead and actually get started. So here I've got VS Code open. I've got the integrated terminal open, and I have an empty directory called restaurant reviews. So before we actually dive into this, you want to make sure, first of all, that you've got Node installed. The latest version is here. And then some other tools that we'll be using, the React Dev tools. If you've got Chrome, cool. If you've got Firefox, they've also got great dev tools as well. But this will be super helpful for us in this tutorial and for you moving forward. We're going to be using a package called UUID v4, and all this does is generate IDs for us, and we'll be needing those for our reviews. And then lastly, we've got an icon library called React Icons, and this library actually is a compilation of a bunch of different icon libraries that you can use on your applications moving forward, but it's really helpful and got lots of great options for us. So to get started, we're in our empty directory and we're going to run npx create react app and then a dot. So what's going on there? npx instead of npm. So in this case, if we run npx, that allows us to run the create react app command without installing create react app globally on our machine. By hitting dot afterward, that just means, hey, go ahead and create the React app in the directory that I'm in currently. So maybe you've messed around with React before and you've done create react app and then the name of your application, and then you have to change directories into that into that application's directory. That is totally fine as well, the dot method or the changing directories. It's just when do you want to switch folders is all. So now I'm in the directory. It looks like React has been successfully put together here in the directory, and it's saying yarn start. It might say npm run start for you. Whatever the directions say, go ahead and go for it. I don't need to change directories into this one because I'm already there. So I'm going to run yarn start. And this should open up a project in the browser. So I'm going to close out this old one. And there we go. So there's our React application. So to kind of guide you around some of the things that we're looking at here. First of all, really important, if you're going to be posting your work to GitHub or Bitbucket or something like that, this git ignore, it's super, this Create React App does this for you, but it's super important that you have node modules ignored. Otherwise, it's going to take forever, and the node modules folder is huge and doesn't need to be on GitHub. And then it includes some other things to be ignored for you. So this stuff will not get pushed up to GitHub. If you get into like .env files where you're eventually hiding secrets and API keys and that kind of stuff, it's a little bit more complex than what we're doing right now. But if you do get to that down the road, just make sure you put that in your git ignore so your secrets aren't out there for the world to see. Next is our package.json. So this is like the basic kind of meat and potatoes information about our application. So you've got your name, your version. The most relevant things right here and right now are the dependencies. So these all come bundled in with React out of the gate. We've got a couple of testing dependencies if you want to run tests on your application. Then we've got React, the library itself. We've got React DOM, which is necessary when you're working with the web. And then React scripts, which you can see are referenced down here in the scripts section. So these scripts, you do npm run, start, or build, or test, or same thing, yarn start, yarn build, etc. And then the rest of this stuff, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to get into. It's not relevant for our application, but that's the package.json file. The next thing to be aware of is our index.html. So inside the public directory, index.html is where our application is actually going to get generated. So I'm going to get rid of this commented out stuff. You can see we've got our favicon here. There's the title, React app. So like we can change this, for example, to restaurant reviews. And when I hit save, so take a look up here, it says React app. When I hit save, restaurant reviews. So hot reloading right out of the package as well with React. So I don't have to come over here and refresh the page every time I make a change, which is nice. So this div with the ID of root, there's nothing here, but I'll show you in a minute. With React, what's happening is we're building out our application, building out all the components, all the logic, everything in our application, then eventually comes and gets rendered here. And so since you can see some stuff on the screen, I'll show you. If you inspect, you can see there's our div with the ID of root right here. And then we've got some other stuff, which is all of this content that comes with the library to begin with once it's installed. Or once this Create React app is installed, excuse me, not the library. So close that. That's our index.html. So now in our source, and I apologize, I know we're not getting right into coding just yet. I'll have timestamps down below for people that want to skip ahead, but I just want to make sure that, you know, if you're just starting out with React, you kind of have a feel for what's going on and where to find different things and everything like that. So don't worry, we'll be getting to the coding in just another minute or two here. So some cleanup. We'll get rid of tests. We'll get rid of the service worker. That'll probably throw an error here. Yep. We'll get rid of logo.svg. We'll get rid of app.test.js. So let's go in our index.js file. So this is where we're going to actually render our application. So we can get rid of this service worker thing that's like offline stuff and get rid of this. So now this is cleaned out. So this index file takes our app component, our main application, and then sends it out to the, it communicates with our index.html file to grab that div with the ID of root and just pump out all of our application component data into it. So that's all handled here in index. And then in app.js, this is where all of our like component logic and architecture and stuff will actually live. So we deleted the logo, so we can delete that from up here, and we can delete everything in the middle. And we hit save. We should have a blank screen without any errors. And just to make sure that it's working, we can say, hey. And there we go. So it's in the center of the screen because app.css is being imported at the top. So if I go into my app.css, we just get rid of all this. We'll use some styling for this. And now it's just in the top left. So we'll come back. So a couple things going on here. Whenever we're working in a React component, you need to make sure to import React from React. And then since all of our, in this application, all of our components are going to be children of this app parent, we can just import app CSS once, and then all of that CSS will flow downward into the children, which is pretty helpful and keeps us from having to import stuff a bunch of times. All right, so the first thing that we're going to build out is our form component. So while we're doing this, just be aware there are going to be times when we're getting some errors and stuff. I'll try and explain what's going on and why it's happening when, but for the most part, it'll just be because we're like referencing something that hasn't been created yet. So let's go ahead and start off. Let's get rid of this hey. I'm going to cut this, get parentheses, paste, and then we'll do an H1, and we'll say restaurant reviews. Save that, great. And then we'll make our form component. So when you're making a component in React, you've got that capital letter, and then it's just a self-closing tag, and you can see VS Code is telling me it's not defined yet. So if I save this, we'll get an error in the browser. So let's go ahead and make it. So when I'm working on an application, I like to try and keep things somewhat organized. You'll see varying levels of this. So in my source, I'm going to create a new folder called components. And then inside my components folder, I'm going to create a new file called form.js. And so you might see people get really, even more granular with this, and they'll make like a form folder, and then inside their form folder, they have their form.js, and then their form.css, and da-da-da-da-da. Depending on how complex or how simple your application is, it's totally up to you. This is just one way of doing it. And again, like I said at the beginning of the video, there are lots of right ways to put together a React application. So feel free to organize in whatever way makes sense for you. So I have this VS Code extension where if I type in RACFE and then hit enter, it'll create this functional component for me. So I'll give you a second to catch up, but just a couple of things that it takes care of. One, imports React from React. Two, it sets up a form component, a functional component here, and then it exports that. So you always want to make sure, again, like I mentioned before, you import React at the top, and then you want to make sure that you are exporting your component. So I'm exporting it as a default. All right, so in our form, we are going to replace this div tag with a form tag. We'll do an H2 with leave a review, capitalize that. And then let's get some inputs. So we'll have our label HTML4 restaurant. And then we'll have our input. So it's good for accessibility and semantic markup to make sure that you have labels. And then this HTML4 just lets the code know that this label is for the input with a matching ID. So we're going to do type of text, a placeholder of restaurant name, and hopefully this is looking familiar if you're familiar with HTML. We'll do a value of form dot. Actually, we'll come back to value because this will make sense after we set up our state. We'll do an ID of restaurant. We'll do a name of restaurant. And I'm going to set autocomplete to off just because it gets kind of annoying when you have autocomplete continuing to try to complete your stuff. All right, so let's see. Form is not defined. So we have our form component, but it's saying it's not defined. What's going on with that? Well, this tells you on line 8 in app.js. So let's look here. There's form. The issue is that even though it exists, we haven't imported it. So we can import form from /. So we're in the same directory. And you can see IntelliSense tells me, hey, here's your options. So I'll go components and then /form. You don't have to put the JS at the end. And there we go, looking beautiful. So let's grab one more. We're going to do a text area for this second one. So I'm going to highlight these two and copy them below. And we'll do, let's see, I'll copy through this and then update a few things. So we'll do review. So this is a text area. So we don't need type equals text. Placeholder, we'll do what did you think? ID is review, name is review, and we don't need to worry about autocomplete. All right. So we've got our two inputs. And then the last thing that we'll need for this form is a button with the type of submit. And we'll say submit. All right, so we've got our form. We can type some stuff into it. We can hit submit. Nothing happens, but we're seeing some things actually going on the page. But what do we do with that data? So this is where we can start getting into our understanding of React state. So up at the top, after React, we can do a comma, curly braces, and we can do useState. So let me type this out first, and then I'll kind of explain what's going on. So we'll do const form set form equals useState, and we'll have this as an empty object. Let me just check my notes here. Actually, we'll do restaurant. I don't know why I picked such a hard word to spell. Review. And then ID. We'll set initially to null, but we'll come back to that. And then give it a save. All right, so what's happening here? So with React, we have this useState hook. And so at this point, if you're familiar with class-based components, cool. But hooks, for the most part, seem to kind of be the standard at this point. And so, you know, unless it comes up in a job, like, or on an interview or something, I probably wouldn't worry about spending too much time on class-based components, at least while you're first starting out with React. So anyway, this useState hook is set up like this. You have your variable here, which is form. And so this is basically like saying that I've got a variable that's set to an object of restaurant review and ID. So if I put this and I paste it, so this form is essentially the same thing as this form. The second piece of it is set form. This is the updater. So with this useState hook, you're able to hold your information in a variable, and then you're able to update it with this second piece in the array here. So that gets to be super helpful. So now we can actually set up our inputs to be controlled and updated by this state hook. So in our input, we are going to set a value. And this value is going to be form dot, and since it's the restaurant, we'll do form dot restaurant. And then for this text area, we'll set this value to be form dot review. And then hit save. Okay, so nothing is changing. So what is happening? Well, now, if we open up our DevTools and we go to components, we can see our form. And we can see in this hooks section that we've got our state being tracked. Our restaurant is an empty string, our review is an empty string, and our ID is null, just like we set it. The problem is we're trying to change this input in this text area, but we don't use the thing that we're supposed to use to change it, which is set form. So we can create a function to keep track of the state, and we can keep track of what is being typed in here and then update this state in real time. So let's go ahead and create a function for that. So we can say const handle change equals E. E is just shorthand for event. So you can say whatever you want. Event, you can say EV, you can say, I just do E because it's shorter. Then we'll use a little bit of destructuring here. And we're going to pull the name and value off of E, coming in here, dot target. And again, hopefully if you're familiar enough with JavaScript at this point, this shouldn't look too crazy. If this is not making a whole lot of sense to you, follow along for now, but do some research and try to get a little bit more clarity on what's going on here, because this is going to be really important moving forward if you're trying to do like form and state management in your applications. So we've got the name, we've got the value off of e.target. Now we're going to call set form. And what we're doing here is we're going to use the spread operator. So we'll do dot 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 form. And what that means is, hey, whatever we're not touching on the form, we want it to stay the same. So if I've got a value in restaurant and I'm updating the review, I want whatever's in restaurant to stay the same without, but allow me to update the review. So I'll show you a real-time example in just a second. So keep the rest of the form the same, and then we're going to grab the name and set it equal to the value. So again, another kind of weird JavaScript-y thing here, but this makes the handle change function reusable. Is we are using it's known as the computed property name here to take the name off of the input or the text area. So our name is restaurant or our name is review. We're going to grab that name and set it equal to the value. So that might sound a little bit confusing, but in another way to kind of illustrate it is we're going to say, hey, set our form. Let me comment this. Set our form to equal, we'll do form at, and then whatever our name is. So form at restaurant is equal to whatever the value is. So the stuff I typed. So that's another way to kind of think about what's going on here. So since the name is restaurant, I'm going to set the form value at restaurant to be whatever the value is of that input or that text area. So by doing that, I'm able to now reuse this handle change. So on the input, I can do on change equals handle change. And then same here for the text area. Not on change, handle change. And now, if we look at our hooks, restaurant, McDonald's. And now it's actually updating, and it's updating down here in our restaurant state. Now remember when I said, hey, spread out the rest of the form? So when I type in this review, I don't want McDonald's to disappear. I want my review to be added, but I want the rest of my form to stay the same. Say it was okay, I guess. And so I type it in here, it's updating in my review, and McDonald's stays the same. Awesome. All right, so for the ID section, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to import UUID from UUID v4. Give that a save. UUID v4. Oh, we didn't install it yet. So I'm just going to add a new terminal tab, and I'm going to do yarn add. Remember I said earlier UUID v4 and React icons are the two extra dependencies that we're going to add. So we'll do UUID v4 and React dash icons. And that should be pretty quick. They're not super huge libraries. All right, so now let's give it a refresh. All right, let's instead Control C, and then I'll run yarn start one more time. And now it should open up and I shouldn't get any errors. Cool. So for our initial form now, instead of setting our ID to null, we'll do UUID and then call it as a function. And now if we take a look at our dev tools, in form, we can see that our ID is already populated for us. So this ID is going to come in handy later when we start working on our deleting and editing. But for now, we've just got that in and taken care of. All right, the next piece that we want to do is create a handle submit function. So similar to handle change, we'll do const handle submit equals E. We're going to do e.prevent default. And this is just a JavaScript thing. We want to prevent the default behavior of reloading the page. So note, if you look up here on the favicon, notice that it's got that quick reload anytime I submit. I don't want it to reload because that's going to, in this instance, erase my data, and reloading the page when you're submitting a form, like if it doesn't need to happen, it's just kind of annoying behavior. So by doing e.prevent default, we're getting rid of that behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our list of reviews. So we need another state hook. So we'll do reviews and set reviews. And we'll set this initially to be an empty array. So when we submit, what we want to do is set our reviews. Similar to what we did with our set form, we want to spread out our reviews. And then we want to tack on whatever values are in the form. So our form is going to be restaurant, review, and ID. And so for this form here, we can add an onSubmit, and we can set that to handle submit. And so let's take a look. So there's our form data, and there's our reviews. So I'm going to type in some random gibberish and then hit submit. Notice that our reviews state now has one item with a restaurant, a review, and an ID. Two kind of weird things happening. Number one, this information is still here in the inputs. And number two, the purpose of this is to display the information. We're not seeing it anywhere. So let's take care of those couple things. So the issue around keeping the information in the inputs, we can take care of that pretty quickly. We can just clear our form by calling set form, and we can actually just copy this from above. So we're just going to essentially reset it to its initial state. So let's see what happens. Type in some gibberish. We'll take a look at our state. Our state has been populated with a restaurant and a review, and now the input is clear for us to add another one. And there we did. Now the reviews array has 2 items. Cool. The second piece is a little bit more tricky. So we've got a form component here, but that's just taking care of handling our information. If we want to display our information, we'd have a couple of options. Number one, we could just tack it on down here. So we could do something like, you know, we could, let's say, wrap this in a div, plop our form down, and then do another div and do like reviews dot map review, and then for this we're just kind of throwing up a nonsense example, but let's do like review dot review, and I'll explain this in more detail when we're actually putting up the serious example. So okay, so there it is, and I'll put in some numbers so we can tell the difference. Okay, so now we're displaying them. Great, that's helpful. The issue is that with React, the way that it's designed is we're supposed to be building out these components. And if this is a form component, we don't also want to display the reviews. We want to have separate components for these reviews. So we need to take advantage of props and component architecture for this. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm just going to Control Z and undo, or Command Z if you're on a Mac. And there, we're back to square one. So what we're going to need to do is go back into our app.js component, and we're going to create a new component called review list. So we'll go in here, we'll do review list.js, RACFE, and you can see if you're in VS Code, ES7 module system, blah, 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 snippets. If you look that up in the extensions little marketplace or whatever, you'll find it and you can use it and save yourself some time. So we've got our review list, and we need to pull in our reviews here. So let's go ahead and save this, and we can just give it an H2 and say like reviews for now, and we'll change this. And then in our app, how about underneath our form, we'll do reviews list, and I've got auto import, so that takes care of it for me. If you don't have that, just make sure you pop it up here at the top, and there we go, there's our reviews. So how do we get the information from our form when we submit it to populate down below in this reviews list component? Well, what we've got to do is grab our information from our form and actually lift it up in this tree. So you can think of this as the app being the parent, or the kind of the top of the tree, and then you've got all the children flowing down beneath. So we've got our form and our reviews list. In this case, are siblings to one another. So you've got our parent and your two sibling children. So for our form, the piece of state that we're going to want to lift up is reviews. So let's grab this and cut it and go back to app and paste it here. We're getting a lot of errors. We need to make sure that beyond React we do useState. And then we can actually, while we're doing this, we can actually take the form state out as well. So let's grab this. We can leave the handle change and everything, and we're getting a lot of errors, but we'll come back to these. And beneath here, we'll paste in our form and set form. And we want to make sure we bring in UUID, so we'll cut that out. Actually, we'll just copy it because we're going to need it in both. We'll save there. Okay, so no errors yet, but there will be. There we go. All right. So now we've got all of these errors because there are things that are being referenced in this form component that technically, as long as at least as far as the form is concerned, these things don't exist. Set form, form, reviews, form, blah, blah, blah. So what we need to do is pass these things down through props. So remember how I said earlier that this app is like the parent? It can pass down properties or props to its children. So similar how parents can pass down hair and eye color to their children, in React applications, parent components can pass down their properties to their children. So the form needs access to a couple of things. It needs access to the form, and we're going to set the form property that we're passing down equal to form here. So what we're saying is, hey, form component, you are going to access this variable form here, and notice that they're both kind of lighter white. You're going to access that information by calling it form. So I'm calling them the same thing. In my mind, it makes it a little bit easier because you're keeping track of everything in the same way. If it's easier for you to call them differently, then I would change this, like form variable. And I'll leave it at that just to illustrate the example. So form variable is equal to form. So now if I go in the form component, I can destructure the properties. So first I'll do props, which are my properties. And let's see, I'm not sure if I'll be able to console log this, but let's see if I can. So let's see, console log props. I'll save everything. And let's see if I can refresh it. Okay, cool. So in my form component, even though I'm getting errors here, I can still access and show you what is being passed down. So in my app, I'm passing down form variable as a property. And then in form, I've got props coming in, and I'm console logging them. So if I open this up, you can see that form variable is coming in the props object. And then you can see I've got my ID, my restaurant, and my review. So to make this even cleaner, what I can do is I can destructure props. And since I know form variable is coming in, I can grab that and refresh. Lots of errors. But now I've just got direct access to my form variable with its ID, restaurant, and review. So again, whatever you call your property here, form variable, that's what you need to use in the child component. So form variable. So I'm going to switch that back, but just be aware again. So form variable, we're setting equal to this form variable here. I'm going to clean this up and just set it back to form equals form, and then form, and get rid of the console log. All right, so we need a couple of other things. So in our app, we need to pass down, it looks like set form, set reviews, and reviews. So let's do that. We'll do reviews equals reviews. We'll do set form equal to set form. We'll do set reviews equal to set reviews. I went through that pretty quickly, but it's the same idea where I'm passing down these properties. So the reviews property is set to this variable. The set form property in the form child component is set to the set form updater, and then same thing with set reviews. So now I can go to this form. I can destructure the props, reviews, set form, and set reviews, and hit save. And now I don't have any more errors. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if stuff is still working. So I've got my form, type in some gibberish, it's updating, review, type in some gibberish, it's working. And then if I hit submit, my review still works. The only issue is I'm not seeing anything in reviews. Well, we need to pass down some more props. So our form is good. Looks like we can get rid of useState in here. That's what VS Code is telling us. No other errors in here. So in our app, in order for our reviews list to be able to show, we need to pass down those props. So let's do it. In our reviews list, we can set reviews equal to reviews. And then in our review list, we'll destructure those reviews off. And we can do, let's see. We'll map through our reviews. And if you're not familiar with the map function, make sure you take some time to review that. But basically what we're saying is, let me delete this because I want to fix something. So reviews.map, so we're taking the reviews array here. And then for each review, we're going to go through and we're going to do something with that array. And so notice that I've got parentheses instead of curly braces. That's an implicit return for map instead of the curly braces, and then needing to do the explicit return. So here we're going to actually do, let's see, we're going to do one more component, and we're going to make this a review item. So let's do review item and kind of go through the same process that we did before. So we're going to do reviews list, get some more errors. We'll create a new component called review item.js, RACFE, enter. And now we've got a review item. And then we want a couple things here. So we want to grab our review off of reviews list. And we need to pass that down as a property. So we'll pass down our review is equal to the review. So to kind of wind back up here, in app, we've got this reviews list component. So app is the parent, review list is the child. Review list is getting this reviews property, which is set initially here as an empty array. And then at any time we submit a new review, it gets added to this array. So that's being passed down to review list. Now, if we go to review list, we grab those reviews and the props, we map through them, and for each review that we get, we're going to create a review item. that review item is going to have access to that individual review object. So if this reviews array is an array of objects, each individual review that's being passed down to the item is going to have an ID, it's going to have a restaurant, and it's going to have a review. So with the understanding that that is happening, now the app has become a grandparent with the child review list, and now review list has a little baby of its own, review item. We can grab our review and we can do some damage with it. So let's make an H2 and we'll say review.restaurant. So I'm just using object dot notation here. So the review is going to come in and we're going to grab the restaurant off of that object. And then we'll do our review dot review. And review item is not defined, so we need to import it. Import review item from / review item. Save. There we go. And now let's see, type in some stuff. And there we go. So we've got our first official review added to the list. Making some great progress. This looks like garbage though, so let's go ahead and do some kind of basic styling stuff here. So let's see, let's go to our app first and let's double check and make sure we've got some classes. So I'm gonna put this lowercase, class name lowercase app. That looks fine. I'm just checking my notes here. Form is gonna have a class name of form. And it looks like that's all I need on this one. On review list, we're going to give this div a class name of review list. And then review item, we'll give a class name of review item. And that should be fine for now. So let's go ahead into our app.css. So in there, we're going to give our app class a width of 100%. I'm going to kind of cruise through this CSS, hopefully, especially because this is not a CSS focus. It doesn't, you saw that finished product. It doesn't look great to begin with. It looks fine, but I'm going to cruise through this in the interest of time. So we'll do width 100, display, flex direction, column, justify content, center, align items, center. Save it. Okay, we're getting a little bit better. For our form, I'm going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid, 0D, 0D, 0D. I'm going to give it a box shadow of 1 pixel, 1 pixel, same black. And I'll do 2 pixel, 2 pixel. This gives it kind of a little 3D, little box look. Dot form. I think I might need to add that. I'm going to give it a padding of 1 rem, and I'm going to give it a width of 20. Let me check to see if this, okay, form, let's check my form. Class name is form. Oh boy. All right, we'll come back to that. All right, so input. And text area. I'm not going to worry about class names or anything here. I'm going to give them a display block margin of 0.5 rem, auto, 0 auto. and padding of 0.25 top and bottom, and then 0.5 rem left and right. For my, oh, and then I'm going to give it a, oh, actually, I'm going to style that button on this group as well. Cool. And then just my input and text area. I'm going to give it a width. I'm going to use the calc CSS function here. I'm going to do 100% minus 1 rem because there's, if you got left and right here, that adds up to 1. So I'm just subtracting that off to have it take up the full width here. I don't know why this, let's see if I take this form off. That's so weird. I wonder why this form style is not working yet. Check my elements, root, app, class name, form. What? Let's see, what did I forget here? That's weird. Invalid property value. Oh, because I put a space there. Jeez. All right, there we go. And then comma is missing here. All right, sweet. So there you can see you got our sweet little kind of boxy shadow thing there. On our button, let's do a border of 1 pixel solid, OD, and then cursor pointer. Cool. For our H1, H2, and H3s, we'll do a margin of 0 top, 0 right, 1 rem bottom, and 0 left. For each review item, and let's get a review real quick. So for each review item, we'll do border 1 pixel solid. And I could definitely be I'm doing a lot of, I'm not being super dry right now. I am definitely repeating myself, but you know, that's what cleaning up and refactoring is for. 2 pixel, 2 pixel. And looks like I got an extra 0 there. All right, padding 1 rem, width 20, and margin top of 1 rem. Cool, so that lines up nice and neatly. If I add another one, it'll just pop down below. And that's good for now. We're gonna add some more stuff here in a minute. So this is great, right? I add my review, Chewy's. It was so great. Oh no, I made a typo. What do? I need to delete this because this is so embarrassing. Wait, I don't know if I want to delete it. Maybe I just want to edit it and get rid of these F's because I really do like Chewy's and it was definitely so great. Well, great news, everybody. Or just you. I don't think you're probably watching this in a group, but we are going to learn how to edit and delete these things here. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So we are going to go ahead and run over to our review list component. So in our review list, we are going to create a function called handle delete. It is going to take in the ID of whatever of these reviews we're trying to target. Then we can set a variable to updated reviews. And what we'll do is we're going to take our reviews. We're going to filter through them. And for all the reviews in the reviews array, we are going to check the review.id. We're going to check the ID of each review. And if it doesn't equal the ID that was passed in, that's what we're doing here with this filter. So we're filtering for any reviews that don't match the ID here. So then from there, we're going to set our reviews to be equal to updated reviews. So to walk through that one more time, we're grabbing a variable here. With this filter method, we're taking our reviews array and we're filtering through them to say, hey, give me an array of all of the reviews that do not have the ID that was passed in here. So basically we're saying get rid of the review that has this ID, and then we're going to set the reviews to that new array. So you might be wondering, hey, what gives with this set reviews is not defined nonsense? Well, what we need to do is pass this down from above. So in our reviews list, we can hit save. We'll go back into app.js, and in our reviews list, we'll do set reviews is equal to set reviews. Set reviews is not defined. Oh, and reviews list, and then we need to actually bring it in. Set reviews. Cool. So let's go ahead, and now what we need to do is we need to actually pass this delete function into each review item. So we'll pass that down through props, and we'll say delete. So the delete property is going to be equal to handle delete. We'll save that. And then on our review item, we're going to bring in that property delete. And then let's go ahead and make a new div down here. And we'll say button, and then we're going to bring in an icon. So we're going to import, I'm going to do curly braces, I'm going to say from React icons /FA, and now I can go in here, and IntelliSense will give me lots of great options. I know we're going to use trash. So inside of this button, we'll do FA trash. And save, delete. Oh, because that's a key, so we can't actually use delete because that's a reserved word. So we'll do handle delete here as the property. And then in reviews list, we'll call it handle delete. So handle, I changed this property now is called handle delete. So the review item is going to look for a property called handle delete, which makes reference to this function. And then in review item, now handle delete can be used. So when I click this button, let's go ahead and, so we're going to call it with handle delete and the ID. Actually, before we do that, let's console log the ID. Okay, so ID is not defined. So what we need to do here is, let's see if we can grab the review.id. So since ID is on the review object, this should work. Let's take a look. If we console log. So in our components, let's make a couple. All right, so in our reviews, this first one, this SDG, this one, has an ID of 1965, blah, blah, blah. So if I click on delete 1965, see if I click here, delete 26,824. So it's reading that ID. So if we remember in the delete function, what we're doing is we're not trying to console log the ID. We're trying to basically target the ID and then remove it from the array. or we're kind of doing like a reverse logic of that where we're saying, hey, like filter for the IDs that don't match and then keep those and then get rid of the other one. So let's do that. So in our review item, instead of console logging the review.id, we can handle delete it. So add some. I'm going to take care of that warning here in a second. All right, so we've got 3 reviews. If I click on delete, gets rid of it. FSF, see ya, GSD, GS gone. Awesome. Okay, so there was one error that I want to take care of. Each child should have a unique key prop. So whenever you're mapping through, you're creating stuff based off of an array, you want to make sure you add a key to it so that React can essentially like keep track of everything that's going on in the DOM. So here in my reviews.map, what I can do is give it a key, and I can set that key equal to the review.id. So the key needs to be a string and it needs to be unique. So you can't have set the numbers, you can't have repeating keys, otherwise you'll get these errors. So now we should be good. And if I submit them just to check it out, great. All good. So that's our handle delete. But what happens if we don't want to delete a review and then have to re-enter it? We want to actually just edit it. Well, we can create a similar function and just call it handle edit. So first, what we're going to need to do in our app.js, we're going to create a new state hook, and we're going to call it editing and set editing, and we're going to use the initial state of false. So editing is false, and set editing is how we update this to be true or false. So basically what we're doing here is we're having a Boolean, a true or false value of editing, and saying like, are we editing or are we not? So we want to kind of turn on editing mode. We're going to pass that information down into form editing, and that should be lowercase. We're also going to pass down the set editing updater. And reviews list is going to need access to set editing as well. And then it's also going to need access to set form here in a minute. And I'll show you why. Just go ahead and blindly trust me for now. Set form equals set form. Save. Let me just double check to make sure I've got all the variables and props and everything that we need. This is looking good. Okay, so make sure your form has access to editing, which is from this new state hook. Form we did earlier, reviews, set form and set reviews we did earlier. Set editing is the new one. And then in reviews list, you've got props for reviews, set form, set editing, and set reviews. So next step in our form.js, and we are going to grab those properties. So we're going to destructure them off of props. We're going to grab editing because that's what we called it, and then set editing. And that should be good. And then we're going to create a new function here called const handle update. Similar to handle submit, we're going to do e.prevent default. At this point, editing would be set to true. So what we're doing here with this function, before I get too deep in the weeds, is it's essentially an alternative to handle submit. So right now we submit it, but if we want to update it, we don't want to call it submit again. We want to populate this form with this stuff, and then we want to update it instead of submitting another review. So we're going to set editing to false. At this point, it already is false. So you might be asking, like, why are we doing this? When we're running this handle update function, we'll already have access to the values in the form. So we're just updating whatever our review is. And so we're going to turn editing mode back off. And for now, let's go ahead and leave this as it is. And I'll come back to it because it might make more sense if we handle the actual like state management stuff here. But let's go ahead and scroll down. For our onSubmit, we're going to use a ternary operator here. And inside onSubmit, since we're already in curly brackets, we can use JavaScript. So we're going to read that value editing. If editing is true, then onSubmit for this form is going to be handle update. But if editing mode or editing is false, it's just going to be our regular handle submit. Okay, no UI changes there. The other thing that we're going to want to change is the text down here. So instead of submit, in between the button, we're going to do curly braces so we can insert some JavaScript. And again, we'll read the value of editing. Is it true? If it is, then this button is going to say update. If it's false, then it's going to say submit. Okay, and since app.js editing is false, this is going to be submit. But if I were to update this to true, now it says update. Okay, next, we are going to go into our form. We're going to be kind of jumping back and forth between the form and review list components. So in our form, let's go ahead and handle the, oh, excuse me, not the form, the review list. And we're going to have a handle edit function. The handle edit function is going to take in an ID. And what we're going to do is we're going to filter for the post that we're looking for. So edited post equals reviews.filter, almost identical to the handle delete, but instead of getting all of the items from the array that don't match the ID, we want to grab the review where the review.id equals the ID that's being passed in. So edited post, this variable equals reviews.filter, where the review.id is equal to the ID. We are then going to set our form, to the edited post. But if we just left it like this, we would get an error. And the reason why is you might be thinking, okay, well, the edited post is the one post that matches the ID. The issue is that this filter method returns an array. So you're getting an array with a single item. So quick fix, edited post at 0 gives me the first post in that array. And then we're going to set our editing mode to true. I'm getting some errors because I haven't imported these. So let's just double check to make sure what is supposed to be coming into review list. Obviously these two things are. Okay, so we're just missing those two, set form and set editing. So editing, set form. All right. And now our review item is going to need access to the handle edit method. So we'll pass this down, handle edit equals handle edit. And now similar to our delete function, we'll go ahead and add a button for editing. So let's go to our review item. And in our little, we'll give this a class name because we'll add some styling to it. Buttons, we'll just copy this we'll do FA edit, and then we'll do a handle edit with the review.id. Now we need to make sure that we're actually bringing in this property. Oh, geez. All right, there we go. And not getting any errors, so let's go ahead and take a look. We might have some wiring left to do. All right. So now if I click on this edit, watch the form. So the form now takes on whatever values were in this review. And so now I can update it. And let's see if this will work. Good. Update. Okay, so it looks like we're still missing a little bit of setup here, which we can finish up here in a second. But what we've done so far is in our review list, we've identified which post we want to edit, and then we've set the form up here to be equal to that post. So if I want to edit this DSFS, I click on edit, and then it updates the form. So now I can update this. And now our goal is to actually update it when we click on this button. So that is back in our form component. So if we go to form and our handle update, right? So this is unfinished currently. So what we want to do is let's create a variable called updated reviews, and let's set it equal to reviews.map, and we'll go through each review, and if the review.id is equal to the form ID, then we'll set it equal to form. Otherwise, if not, we'll set it equal to the review. So what's happening here? We are taking our current reviews array and we're mapping through it. And we're going to look at each ID on each review. So each review's ID, if I go through this in my array here, so I'm going to look at each of these IDs, 0D, whatever, 6A1. If that ID equals the ID in this form here, then I'm going to update the value to be in this new array. I'm going to update the value to be whatever is in the form. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave it alone as it is. So what's happening here is in the form here, you can see that this ID is 6A1 whatever, and number 1 here in this array is 6A1. So I know that I'm going to actually let me move on to the next step, and it'll make more sense, because right now I'm just explaining this variable, but it doesn't make sense because I haven't told you what we're doing with it yet. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to use our set reviews updater, and we're going to set our reviews to updated reviews. So what we're doing is we're going to create a new array. Our array is going to be equal to all of the, like, let me add a couple more. So let me refresh this. Let me get a couple. All right, so we've got four reviews. So this form has its default ID and a blank restaurant, a blank review, and then we've got 4 reviews, each with its own unique ID and review and restaurant. So if I want to update it, what I'm going to do is, remember, if I click on this update button, it is going to now set the form. Notice that the form component or the form state got updated down here. It's going to set the form to the values that are in this review. And so what this update function is doing is it's mapping through all of the reviews, and if the ID in this array, so C9, DB, 8E, or 82, if that matches the ID that's currently in the form, then what we're going to do to this array is we're going to return that form object. So we're going to tack this onto the reviews. Otherwise, we're just going to return whatever's already in this array. And then we're going to update that with our set reviews updater. The last thing that we're going to do is just clear out our form afterward. And we'll save it, so I'm going to need to do a couple more. All right, so let me close this. All right, so FSDF. I'm going to hit edit. Let's go to my review, and oops, that was a typo. I'm going to say good, and then update. And notice that now it updated and it cleared out my form. So it was able to update everything for us, but keep this other review intact because this ID didn't match the ID that was in the form when I hit the edit button. Because this edit button is like ID up in here, and that's what is being kept track of. And so at this point, all it would take to match up the demo that I showed you at the beginning of this video was just a little bit more styling for like these buttons. But I wouldn't worry about that. That would be a good extension activity. So really nice job hanging with me in this tutorial. Again, like I said, I know React can be tricky, and when you're watching lots of different tutorials, it's hard to keep track of everything and kind of like wondering like what's the right way to do all this stuff. And eventually just you got to remind yourself it takes time. It takes chipping away, and most importantly, it takes building little mini projects like this as often as possible, and especially on your own. So I encourage you to take this knowledge and move forward with some next steps. So in this tutorial, we learned some basic create, update, and delete functionality. So a next step for you could go a step further and learn basic CRUD operations. So that extra R is for read, and that typically refers to some sort of backend. So maybe you're connecting this with like MongoDB or Firebase. You could check out the useEffect hook. So in addition to useState, useEffect is probably one of the more commonly used hooks in React projects. So that's used for updating the UI. It's used for API calls, lots of really cool stuff. Speaking of API calls, you could extend this activity by calling to the Yelp API or build out something similar on your own. And you could also check out things like local storage if you wanted to play around with something that kind of looks like persistent state but isn't actually. But if you're trying to like demo stuff on a portfolio, things like that, that can be kind of cool. So thanks again for watching. If you liked the video, please go ahead and like it, and you can subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. If you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, have a good one.